Good evening everyone and welcome to my channel. On this video, I'd like to talk about something different. This time, I'd like to talk about things about the Titanic. Now, people know that the Titanic was the biggest ship in the world during that time in the 1910s. The 1912 is when it came out and all that. And people say that the ship was actually supposed to be unsinkable. Well, some things about the ship are actually true though. And people may ask, if Titanic is actually unsinkable, why did it sink? Well, the answer for that is because just because they said it was unsinkable, that doesn't actually mean it will never sink. That's not what it means. Because when they mean unsinkable, they're talking about it could stay afloat if only a certain amount of water was in its hull, because it was big enough to hold a certain amount of water in its hull, which is the reason why, they say it's unsinkable, because not just that, but it also has flood doors in the hull, which stops the water from getting to any other part of the ship. But if it was too damaged, like too many of its compartments were flooded, then the ship will sink because it's too much water weight. And the reason why Titanic sank was because too many of its compartments were flooded. It can only hold 4 compartments full of water, but when it hit the iceberg, it had 5 compartments flooded, which was too much, and too much weight for the ship to handle. And, and that was why Titanic still sank, because there was too much water and the damage was so bad that they couldn't stop it. So, just because Titanic was unsinkable, that doesn't actually mean it will never sink. Because, that's just what people say about Titanic. And, other ships, they have the same feature as the Titanic, such as the flood doors and all that stuff, to, make it stay afloat. That just means, the ships could be saved, if it's not too flooded. That's what the safety feature is for. That doesn't actually mean unsinkable means that, that a ship will never sink, ever, because any ship can sink, even the new ones that we have today. And what can also help you understand is a little information in this book right here, on board the Titanic. Now, I'm only going to show just certain pages of the book, so that way you'll see the pictures of what I've been telling you, and what I mean by the story of Titanic and why it actually didn't stay afloat. Okay, here we are. Now on this page, you can see that the Titanic was, trying to avoid the collision of the iceberg. And, even though the crew members of the crow's nest, which was on the top of the ship right here, where they do a lookout for anything in the path of the ship. Now, even though they were able to see the iceberg, but the problem was the Titanic was also going so fast, and not just that, they were a little too close to actually, react fast enough to actually tell, the bridge that the ship was coming towards the iceberg. And the crew members didn't find their binoculars in time to actually be able to see ahead of time before the Titanic before they actually saw that iceberg. And it was nighttime at that time too, so they couldn't see it far away, and because it was too dark. And another thing that that also happens too is that even though the Titanic actually tries to turn, but the problem is that ship is over 30,000 tons, and a ship that big can take a long time to turn. And the reason why Titanic took that long to actually turn, because with all that weight, it takes forever to move it because of its weight. And not just that, the iceberg was actually bigger underneath than what they've seen on the surface of the iceberg. So they didn't realize how big it actually was until it was too late. And the damage was so bad that, it made a hole big enough that can actually flood 5 compartments, which we'll see in this next page. So right here, this part right here, you can see that there's a flooding going on in the book. And, a flooding going on in the ship, sorry. And crew members are running through the hull of the ship. And if you can look in this picture right here, and above these crew members, there is a flood door. Now, those flood doors, they close to stop the water from getting any further into the ship. But unfortunately, because of the condition of the accident, like this, for the Titanic, 5 of its compartments were flooded, not 4. So if you look closely, you'll see what I'm talking about. You see how the water is right over here? This is the front of the ship, and 5 of its compartments got flooded, which is too much weight for the ship. And with all that weight going on, there's no way the Titanic can stay afloat, because technically it's like the water's pulling it in, to the bottom of the water, which is the reason why Titanic didn't stay afloat. The flood doors were able to slow the sinking down, but still, but the damage was just too much, which was unfortunate. And, because Titanic was a big ship, that doesn't actually make it the safest. And people say Titanic was actually safer than any other ship that they had in those days, too. Well, technically it's both yes and no, but the bad thing was about it, being not safe, is because it only had 20 lifeboats in it, on the ship, because they thought, because too many lifeboats would make it too crowded for people on the deck of the ship, which was a very stupid thing that they've done. That was pretty much the only stupid thing that they did about Titanic. And about, the turning of the ship, they didn't even know how long that actually takes for a ship that big to actually turn. Because, like I said, that ship's 30,000 tons. And, something like that, it's not easy to move. Just like when people try to move, I don't know, maybe a giant TV screen or something. That'd probably take forever to move because it's too heavy, or anything else that could be really heavy. You never know. That just depends on what it is, and, and even though, so Titanic actually, was, and also it was supposed to, be, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hesitate, but what was I going to say about it? Sorry, please be patient for a moment until I think about what I meant to say about this. Oh, okay, so when Titanic only had a few lifeboats, only half of its passengers survived. So only 2,200 were on board the ship total, and half of them have died. Another thing that they did stupid, too, a foolish thing, too, was that they only filled some of the lifeboats half full instead of just filling them up all the way. That's also another reason why a lot of people died, too. Not just because of how many lifeboats they just had. And, this is just how it was. And even though Titanic was a big ship, but it still, could have sank fast, too, especially if the flood doors did not close. Because without that, Titanic would have sank faster, like probably would have taken shorter than 2 hours to sink if they didn't close the flood doors after they hit the iceberg. So, you know, sometimes, the safety features on things like Titanic, the flood doors sometimes can just slow down the sinking of a ship. But it doesn't always mean that the ship will stay afloat, because it depends on how bad the damage has been. But they say, like, if Titanic did a head-on collision, like I saw this video on YouTube one time, and they said that if Titanic actually did go head-on, it would have stayed afloat, because probably only just one or two of its compartments would be flooded, and the ship would still stay afloat, because that's not too much water for it and all that. Now, another thing that people are also wondering is, why did the Titanic split apart? Well, it's actually quite simple. The reason why that happened was because, let's look in the book, and I'll tell you. Well, let's start off with this page right here. Now, you see like how the Titanic's back is starting to rise up. Now, the reason why the ship split apart is because when the ship was rising up, the pressure back here, was too much for the ship to handle. The gravity. Just like when you raise your hand for so long and your arm gets tired and all that. That's kind of like what it was with the material holding the Titanic together. And when it was high enough, too much pressure was, built on the ship. And then that's when this happens. It's all just because all that weight on the back of the ship was just too high, which was why it split in half like that. Which could happen to any ship, really, that can actually, hold that much weight like that. Especially because it's a huge ship. And, like, it's not balanced. Like, if the ship is actually completely flat down, then, it's balanced. But if it's being flooded, it's unbalanced. And the water in the front of the ship is making the front heavy. So that way the back lifts up, which causes the ship to split. And so I hope that answers your question about why Titanic split in half like that. Because like I said, any ship can do that, no matter how safe it is. And, and after the ship split, obviously we all know that the ship just submerged and was gone forever. And, it's just how it was. And so Titanic was actually, it was unsinkable, because it was considered unsinkable because, like I said, because of the flood doors it had, which can, stop the water. It depends on the damage, though. Like you saw in the picture of the book about how many compartments were flooded and all that. But you saw in the picture that 5 compartments were flooded, not 4. And 4 is its minimum number of weight from water. And unfortunately, Titanic took too much damage. But if they actually saw it in time, if they had the binoculars, which they had back then, but I've heard that they couldn't find them on the ship for some reason, and the people in the crow's nest never found them, and they couldn't see ahead of time to see what was going on. If they saw the ship really far ahead, a couple miles away, then they would have actually turned in time, because they would have a lot of space before they actually reached the iceberg. But unfortunately, that didn't work. And, that's how, and they lost a liner, especially on its first voyage, because the Titanic only had one voyage, and then that was it. It was gone. And I guess that's it for this video. And I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and I hope this video was very helpful about Titanic. And if anyone has any questions about Titanic, please give me any please feel free to answer any questions in the comments below on my YouTube channel. And as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to have polite comments as usual. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you, and have a good night.